welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We're looking at November's astrology, and today we're going to be looking at the week of the 13th to the 20th of November, going from Wednesday to Wednesday, because we like to honour our good friend Hermes, Mercury, the god of astrology. With me, I have my very good friend Shawna from Smart Astro. Would you like to say a bit about yourself and your work, Shawna?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Shawna. You can find me at smartastro.com along with all the socials, same handle, available for birth chart readings. We do Hellenistic style, so very traditional, focusing on the 7 traditional planets.
Right, we'll dive straight into the overview of the month, and going from the 13th, so we're on to page 2 already, and these are the transits we're going to be looking through, and I'll show you the breakdown on the other page, but you can just see how it fits into the month from the 15th right up to the 20th. And this is how that looks in terms of what we're covering and what we're not, and we're just going to talk you through that a little bit. So on the 15th, we have Saturn stationing direct at 12 degrees of Pisces. And interesting, because Saturn's been retrograde for quite a long time in Pisces. And Chris Brennan was saying that when these longer, slower moving planets, Saturn's the outer one of the traditional planets, one of the slowest moving traditional planets. And when he stations, he tends to bring out the most intense of the significations of Saturn in Pisces. So Saturn in any sign, stationing to turn retrograde or stationing to turn direct, is going to bring out the intensity of Saturn in whatever that sign is. So we did see when Saturn first stationed to go retrograde, it was the intensity of Saturn in Pisces was bringing about a lot of shipping accidents that we spoke about last week, and the submarine and the bridges where barges were moving into them. So hopefully we won't see a return of that. We might see resolutions towards that. Sometimes the turn direct, like the retrograde, brings the problems, and the turn direct brings the solutions. So that's what we'll be hoping for. But we'll certainly see some of the Saturn in Pisces significations being brought to our attention, I would imagine. Then on the 15th, literally the same day, just later that same day, which means that Saturn station is part of this full moon. We have the full moon in Taurus at 24 degrees. That's going to be significant. That's going to be an intense one because it's conjunct Uranus, and it's also close to the fixed star Algol, and obviously it has the Saturn station built into it as well. We'll see the 16th, the following day, the sun will be exactly opposite Uranus, retrograde. But obviously that will be applying during the time of the full moon as well. So a lot of this is feeding into that full moon moment of like quite some intense astrology feeding into it, I feel. And the sun opposite Uranus in Taurus is a very stable sign, and then Uranus is like known as the awakener, the revolutionary, the one that like shakes things up and likes to destabilize. And when the sun is opposite it, it's very much illuminating. Like it's like the full moon moment of we see everything that Uranus is trying to shake up and do. This is a time when the sun might be showing us exactly what's going on. Then we see Mercury opposite Jupiter, and we spoke about that last week when Mercury moved into Sagittarius, and we have Jupiter in Gemini. They've got that nice mutual reception between each other. So the whole time that Mercury's moving through Sagittarius, that will be in effect. But this week on the 18th, that goes except so that we see that opposition. Jupiter brings wisdom and brings things together, creates structures and organizations like that support wise philosophical teaching, learnings. He's thought of as the mage in Sagittarius. And then Mercury is communicating that to us. Mercury is about our thoughts and the way that we communicate to other people, and the way that how we understand what people say to us. So you could have a conversation with 4 people, and 2 people can take away or hear something different to what the third person hears. And that can be about where our individual Mercuries are and how we hear and take in information. So this could be about how that Jupiter in Gemini information, how that information is getting out to us, and also how Mercury is sharing it with us. Then on the 18th, we've also got the Sun trining Neptune, who's retrograde in Pisces. So Saturn and Neptune aren't together yet, but they will be soon. The Sun trining Neptune is interesting because whenever the Sun trines an outer, it's an indication that they're going to be changing direction soon. So that shows also it's an indication to me to check when Neptune's due to change direction. Neptune will indeed change direction on the 7th of December. and start moving direct as well. And so we'll have both Saturn and Neptune by the time we get past the 7th of December, both turning direct in Pisces and moving towards Aries for 2025. And then the finale of the week is the big one that we've been waiting for. We've been talking about it since I literally became an astrologer, since I started learning about astrology, is Pluto entering Aquarius. So he's gone in and out. Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008. Then he first entered Aquarius in March 2023. He retrograded back. He re-entered in June 2023 and January 2024 as well. And now this is the final entrance where future retrogrades will all be within Aquarius. From now on, for the next 20 years, is staying within Aquarius. So this is probably like the transit of the year, I would say, or even the last few years has been the biggest one that we've been talking about consistently. Shawna, what are you making of this week? What are your thoughts as I've gone through that?
Yeah, well, I mean, Pluto hits Aquarius. It's every almost 250 years. So it's been a while. You know, I think it's close to about 240, 248 or something like that before it enters the sign completely. And we've been waffling and jumping, you know, playing jump rope with Capricorn Aquarius now for 18 months or so. Yeah, and it's time. It's time. We need some fresh things to happen. We need some more positive, forward-moving changes. And I'm hoping it brings some really exciting things, but exciting and scary can go hand in hand. So I think, you know, caution is a good word. Caution just meaning, you know, thinking thoughtfully about that process and how to move forward. That was a wonderful reminder too, when the sun is trining one of the outers, that one of them is going to change direction. I forget that sometimes. So that's a really great reminder. Yeah, it's a great reminder. And then, yeah, we've got Saturn stationing. So I kind of worked my way back up the list a little bit, but Saturn stationing direct it's going to be good. And we're going to kind of move forward again and maybe not feel quite so stale or stiff. So that'll be a nice change. For me personally, it happens to be moving over my MC. So I'm like, okay, let's stop waffling and get moving here on some things. But
yeah, let's do this. You've got this, Shawna. Have you got an idea of what that means from when he was previously on your MC?
I have not done that deep dive. I need to, but I have not done that deep dive. Yeah, I would have to probably go back and look at the 7.5 year marks and see if I can get those, you know, those quarter spots and get a better idea of how we're going to move forward with that. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm feeling this build up. So yeah, it's good.
Okay, so do you want to take us away with Saturn direct?
Sure. Saturn is in Pisces, going to station and turn direct at 12 degrees. In this chart, it's in the 12th house, but it's really going to make a difference where it lands in your own chart and how it's transiting for you. When Saturn stations direct, we can look at themes of like spiritual discipline, emotional healing, maybe some idealistic goals, things like that. I was also thinking about how that can bring up like maybe facing long avoided like emotional work too. Saturn in Pisces tends to be kind of melancholic and nostalgic, and that's not always bad. Those things sometimes come with, you know, heavy and, you know, shadowy connotations, but those can be really good too. You know, that bittersweet moment can really be found when Saturn is in Pisces. Could also mean, you know, like a sense of clarity or new commitment, realizing some more spiritual goals, like I mentioned before, finding new ways to merge like dreams with practicality as Saturn is turning. Chris Brennan likes to talk about the 27 Club, and that being like musicians that all had Saturn in Pisces, or when they hit 27 years of age, you know, they had mental health issues and things. Maybe this is an opportunity to pay more attention to mental health and mental health issues, not necessarily for yourself, but can also indicate, you know, some need for assistance for those around you, or even just to make it, you know, more of a topic of conversation, because that's one of those things that tends to get brushed aside, brushed under the rug, that kind of thing. You can't find that assistance and that help if you aren't keeping that at the surface to some degree. On the lighter side, things like speaking to the emotional wellness, sometimes that can look something like counselor, guidance counselor, therapist, maybe even a life coach, starting a new study like astrology or something, something else. Spiritual doesn't necessarily have to mean like religion. It can just mean something that you are like a daily practice, a daily ritual. It could be yoga. It could just be working out. It could be, anything like that. Walking meditation, those kinds of things. It could be new art too. Like you could start, if this transit's happening in your fifth house, it could be, maybe you're trying a new medium. Maybe you start, instead of using acrylics, you start watercolors or, something like.
I really like all those ideas. It's really nice. What I like here about as well is that Saturn can see both of its rulers. So we've got Saturn in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter in Gemini. And we've got a square there that can cause tension, a whole sign square. And then we've got a sextile to Venus is in Capricorn, which is Saturn's sign. So again, no, it's not a mutual reception, is it?
Well, by exaltation.
Yeah. So there is a relationship between them, and Venus is the triplicity ruler there as well in Capricorn, as well as the triplicity ruler in Pisces. So Saturn's got a lot of support there from Venus. So it feels like a benefic placement to turn direct to have Venus there. I think that might help the significations that flow from this stationing, that this chart tells the story of what's likely to happen and what will flow from it. So I think that's quite helpful. We see that also that it's sextile the moon and Uranus that are about to move into the full moon later that day. This is happening at 2:20 in London. So just 7 hours before the full moon. So it really is a part of the signature of that full moon is that station, because Saturn won't really have moved at all by the time of the full moon. So Uranus may be bringing some surprises through, or some insights as well. Saturn being like an outer planet that can connect us to other worlds and being in another worldly ethereal sign. There are those kind of signatures there. And also it's flowing forth from that square with Mercury. Mercury's moving out of that towards the stationing Saturn, but it's still like close enough that it's degree based at 4 degrees in a 4-degree base square. Usually we just look at 3, but with Saturn stationing, and Mercury's slowing, isn't it, to retrograde, getting towards its greatest.
Yeah, I think Mercury's getting close to that slowdown now, because elongation can go anywhere from 18 to 28 degrees, right? For Mercury. Yeah. So approaching that slowdown for sure, but there's definitely a connection there.
Yeah.
So it might be a matter of revising your words so that, they can, whoever you're talking to can understand that a little more clearly, or maybe you find more structure in your communication.
And of course, Mercury is in the sign of the ruler of Saturn. So there's that connection between them all as well. So an immediate sympathy. We've got a trine to the sun as well. So the sun's interested in what's going on. It's like they've all got something to say here about this. And I've got some dates. And I give the dates just in case you've got planets at these degrees or the dates are significant for you. It just helps you notice that this might be important to tune into. So it started the retrograde at 19 degrees. A little bit closer to Neptune there, on the 29th of June in 2024. And it won't be out of its shadow until February 2025. It'll be moving directly forward to Aries together with Neptune. And that will be in the end of May 2025 that they will be getting there almost together. And then it will retrograde back to Pisces in September 2025. So we've got quite a journey there that Saturn's going to be on between Aries, which has a very different flavour, and Martian, like much more about doing kind of flavour, about action, which is not Pisces vibe at all. So a big difference we might feel when it ingresses. But this stationing is kind of the beginning of that, because it's now turning direct, and that is where it's headed. You kind of always look at where planets have been and where they're going. And I think as well, Saturn in Pisces, given that it's connected there with Uranus and the moon and Neptune, that it's like co-present with Neptune and it's connected by sextile with Uranus and the moon. And I was thinking about what that might mean. And it could bring in sudden or unexpected lessons around uncontained or endless water. We were talking about water last week, about how you don't want too little of it and you don't want too much. We know people experiencing both extremes of that water equation at the moment, and it's equally difficult. And equally, that can be about our emotions, as Shawna's been saying, about all the things that come up with Saturn in Pisces. Memory and instinct, and Saturn can sometimes bring the melancholy and the heaviness and the obstacles and challenges, but usually they're there for a reason. Like, do we really want this thing we're working towards? Are we willing to overcome these obstacles? Do we want it enough? And are we willing to do the work for it? And he's asking us those questions to see, what do we really want? You know, what are we really willing to work hard for? And really, Saturn and Neptune together is quite a lovely signature in Pisces about the potential to bring through, like, anybody who's listening to astrology is interested maybe in the spiritual side of life and watching those cycles in our life and how they play out. And so I'm quite looking forward to the two together, the way that it could bring us some grounding in that side of our lives, that it could be a step up to another level in the kind of work that we're doing. There's a lot of potential when Saturn and Neptune come together in Pisces, I feel. So that's something that I'm kind of looking forward to in 2025. You're always nervous when it's Saturn. You don't know quite how hard things are going to get, but it could also mean problems for astrology, like astrology itself being brought into question. That's a potential, or astrology being brought into like a spotlight or being thrown into confusion, like literally that fog descending over us as astrologers, like not being seen. It's going to be interesting, and obviously this station and this moving forwards is going to be part of that story now coming into sight.
I think that actually kind of moves us right into that full moon, doesn't it? Yeah, I feel like it moves us into that full moon, which could be exciting.
Do you want to take it away?
Well, with this full moon, I mean, what really caught my eye with this one is the fact that it's basically conjunct Uranus, right? You mentioned that it's hovering right there when you were talking about the Saturn contacts, but it's a Taurus full moon. So, you know, the moon is exalted in Taurus. Venus is the ruler. Venus really is a planet that likes harmony and peace and ultimately bringing things together, not necessarily dissolution. So Venus gets a little uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, when things start to change or patterns start to shift, things like that. Venus wants nice, easy flow, you know, but it did make me think, you know, right now people are starting to think about Thanksgiving, and it's a little bit early yet for the timing on this one, but Friendsgivings happen usually right before or right after when we do our Thanksgiving holiday in the States. And actually a friend of ours was talking about her Friendsgiving happening very soon and how she was prepping and cleaning. And that also feels very Venusian, right? Preparing and tidying and the ideas of food and, you know, holiday dressing and, you know, things like that. But it also is definitely a planet of like material comforts, security, you know, preparing resources, things like that. So when it's set in a fixed sign like Taurus, then you're reluctant to want to change, or sometimes, you know, I don't want to fall too much into the stereotype, but it's when you get in that good comfy spot and, you know, you worked hard to get there and you can't really envision how changing is going to benefit you yet, you know, is how that feels. But I think this full moon has some excitement around it because Uranus is there. Forgive me, is this also where Jupiter and Uranus had their conjunction earlier this year? 24 Taurus, Jupiter and Uranus.
I think so. Not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think this is where they had their I think this is where they had their conjunction earlier this year. And so I think that might add to or be a continuation of that story, however that's been showing up for you. But I love this card that you have as well for Taurus 3.
Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, those stars just bring so much hope, don't they? Yeah, we're in a very Saturnian place here, where the moon is. It's in Saturn's bound, and it's in Saturn's decan. And Saturn is the double decan ruler. It rules in the Chaldean descending order method, and also in the triplicity method as well. So there is so much Saturn here. You know, if you're a Saturn person, you'll probably feel right at home. But anybody else, it can be a little bit too much, maybe. And equally, Uranus and Saturn don't mix probably particularly well. Saturn is about that steady build of consistency, and Uranus isn't. It's about that sudden change and that change in direction and spark of inspiration. So there is that contradiction going on there. I like that there's a whole sign trine to Venus, same as I said when we were talking about Saturn, that's Venus is there in an earth sign and the full moon's in an earth sign. So the ruler has a nice trines of the nature of Jupiter, which brings like opportunities and optimism and like all that kind of support of a benefic nature. So she's offering that to the lunation, which is always nice. And then the moon is the exalted ruler, as Shawna says. So the moon is right there. Couldn't be in a better place for the moon. So it's always usually a favourite place. Just difficult. That last decan is the challenging one. And also, as Shawna said about these degrees, is challenging as well because that's where Algol, the fixed star Algol, is, and that's a binary star. And I was just reading up about it before we started, and the reason it's binary is it actually is two stars and one orbits the other, so it actually gets eclipsed regularly. So that's why it winks, which I found was quite fascinating. But this is about feminine rage and feminine protection. So it was associated with bad and difficult things happening, but I think it might have been divine justice, maybe like karma coming. I don't want to say too much because it might be bad, but I saw also that it could also be inspiration, creativity. I know there's a lot of very creative people that have this star in their nativity. Mozart was one that his Mercury, I think, rose with Algol, but and also for other people it was a difficult one. Say if it was with Mars, then it might have been more challenging. I think JFK had it culminating with Mars. So that was a lot more challenging. And then Donald Trump's shooting was at that time, I think, of that conjunction. And it was on Algol. And that's when that shooting happened in that crowd. So there are definitely difficult events associated with it. But I prefer to lean into that creative side that it can bring and the female empowerment that it can bring. But also, like it's known as like the winking head of Medusa. So there's like that. Medusa didn't take any prisoners. She wasn't messing around. That girl, she had experienced the worst of toxic masculinity, and she was fighting back big time. So we may see the feminine rise up and feminine rage rise up around this time, or see the worst of what the patriarchy can do to the feminine. I don't know, but I feel somehow that something will be exposed. Around this time, something will come into full view, which is what full moons do. They bring things into full view. It's nice to see that the outers are still in this three-way sextile. I think that's going to be disappearing as soon as Pluto moves. We lose that. So we have Uranus here in a nice sextile, the nature of Venus to Neptune, and then Neptune in a sextile to Pluto. So that's kind of a signature that we'll find in the nativity of charts of people being born around this time. That once Pluto moves into Aquarius, that kind of breaks it up. We'll still have the Uranus and Neptune. And of course, that'll break up in 2025 when Neptune moves into Aries as well. But it's been a signature, and I suppose it's only with hindsight we'll know exactly what it's saying and doing. But it's definitely something we've had our eyes on, that's been the case once Pluto moved back into Capricorn and Uranus reached these end degrees of Taurus, that sextile formed. And as it separates, okay. So we're coming to the end of that, and it's time to start reflecting on what that might have meant, because it's a slower generational thing for the collective rather than something we may have individually experienced. And it's also the grand water trine is broken up because we found Mars moved into Leo, was in Cancer, and will move back to Cancer. So we were enjoying that grand water trine. But obviously we're talking about an earth sign at the moment. It's not necessarily relative, but
no, I think it really is. I think it is. We had, my favorite phrase overuse as of late is wet blanket. Everything just felt heavy and damp, and like you're trapped under it. And I feel like Mars moving into Leo, we're going to get a little, a little bit of reprieve maybe before we turn back around and start reviewing some things and ultimately head back into Cancer.
Yeah, kind of add some heat to the situation, I suppose. If everything's too much water, it can be too much. As much as it's of a benefic nature, it can still be too much. And some heat will dry things out, and we can get ourselves prepared before it moves back. And we see the sun is moving to sextile Pluto. That could be interesting. I don't think it'll actually get there before Pluto will move, but it's sort of moving into that sextile, orbital sextile from Sagittarius, I think. And the sun is...
Yeah, it'll be pretty close, I think, there, but I think it's going to be in Sag.
Yeah. And we've got a trine there with Saturn from the sun. So there's some nice aspects that they're making. Sort of, there's not too many difficult squares being brought in here. So the tarot card that's aligned with this moon is the Seven of Pentacles. And that's kind of also Saturn related. It's the Pentacles relate to the element of Earth. And it's about putting the time and effort in. And we see a man who's done his work and he stops for a break and just reviews what he's done, takes a break, and maybe he's thinking about what else he needs to do. It's about commitment to work, but also time. And Saturn is the Lord of time. And that's kind of the magic ingredient that anybody who's a gardener will know. You plant the seed, but then it's up to time, and we haven't got control over that. And the seasons, how much rain are we going to get, how much sunshine, and you want the right balance of those things. So that's when you're at the mercy of the elements, and that's what we see in Taurus 3. So the astrologer Kira Reiber calls this Deccan preservation, and Austin Coppock calls it the prayer beads. And it is that element of when you've done that work that there's only so much we can do before we've got to bring in that element of humility, really, I suppose, and pray for the best and prepare against the worst. That battling against the hashes, you've got to plant somewhere fertile where they can get the most sun and not on a floodplain or something. You do your best to plan for these things, but you are subject to greater forces than ourselves. We all are. And sometimes we need to recognize that as well. But our prayers don't go unheard here. There is Austin Coppock talks about the Leti, who are the magical spirits of this Deccan, and they do carry our prayers directly to the gods here. So our prayers are heard. So once you've done the work, do say the prayer to keep it safe and free from harm. But yeah, the key words from astrologer Nicola Allen, she's writing a Deccan book to accompany these cards, but she's illustrated these beautiful cards here and shows us this stag. She's given us these keywords of turbulent times, always be prepared, and ward against misfortune. So again, that careful preparation, but also being aware that some things are just out of our hands. And the stag reminds us that when disaster strikes, sometimes it's no fault of our own, but there's also an opportunity to grow there in strength and to learn from our misfortune. And the stag knows that wisdom and patience and humility are gifts that often only those facing adversity know about. If everything in your life is dreamy and safe and well, you often don't necessarily experience that humility or get a chance to lean into that wisdom. And often there can be a helping hand available. So look for it, and don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't be too proud to ask for it if times are tough. But also it's wise to plan for the worst case scenario. Have your plan B, get your insurance, make sure it's paid. So whatever the moon is illuminating for you, it's good to have that sense of, right, have I crossed the T's, dotted the I's, done all I can to look after whatever I'm planning. So in terms of who might feel it, I'm thinking here the sort of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo and Aquarius, and especially around those late degrees, 24, 25, 26, sort of from 22 onwards if you've got planets or placements, your angles at those degrees. Might feel it, but also, like say, if Venus was the ruler of your chart, or the moon, so maybe Cancer as well, or Libra may also be impacted. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the Saturn touch as well, with the Saturn being the Deccan ruler. I think if you've got, given that it's Saturn is stationing and it's going to be in a whole sign sextile, I think you could feel it for better or worse. But yeah, you touched on something with get your insurance and make sure it's paid. It's open enrollment here for us, for a lot of people in the US, to literally get your health insurance, your healthcare, your medical, and it's a curious thing that we've just had our election, and you were talking about that possibility of feminine rage. And the thing it brought up for me is there's been a lot of somber and negative attitudes all across the media right now. But there was also something that was just so beautiful. And I think our friend shared it with us, was, the women in government of other countries saying, we're with you, throughout this entire video. And it was just such a stand of solidarity, because there are so many people that are rightfully concerned. But I'm hoping people keep in mind that things can't change overnight. Even with planets changing signs, things won't change overnight. And when we talk about, Pluto moving into Aquarius, it can be scary and nerve-wracking, but it definitely can be something you can anticipate and hopefully get excited about.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting about the insurance timing, like how astrology, like you see it show up in the world so many times. You think, well, did they know? How did that happen? Yeah.
When I love those little things that, because sometimes you feel like, how is the astrology supporting you? But it's those things. It's, quite literally in this instance, prepare for, like you've got on the screen here, prepare for misfortune, prepare for tough times. And what is insurance other than preparing for tough times, right? It's trying to protect yourself about it. So even in those little minute ways, there was something in my personal life where Mars moved from Cancer into Leo, and all of a sudden the energy levels were higher, not just for myself, but for some others. And, personally, I do my best. I love astrology and I'm in it every day, but I'm also a little bit absent-minded when it comes to the transits of the day. Like, I'll look at them in the morning and then I'll just kind of, okay, there they are. And then I go on with my day. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's how that showed up, or that's how that played out, so it is alive and kicking for sure.
It really is, isn't it? And it can show up in all sorts of ways. I mean, our teacher Adam I was listening to one of his podcasts just recently. He said, yeah, it can show up as a common cold, and karma can literally be working its way out and burning through, as you're moving through a cold. It can show up in all those kind of ways that you just don't expect. It doesn't have to be these big life-changing events all of the time. Just the very mundane things, and just the tiny things that you don't notice that are slightly different, but there it is.
Yeah.
It's great like that. But then literally the day after, that's when the sun will oppose Uranus and really illuminate those new moon themes. So the sun there in Scorpio opposing Uranus at 25 degrees. So that's that full moon point of their cycle. Here on the 19th of November, we have Pluto moving into Aquarius. I wish I had a drum roll or something. Some effects, it's happening now. And I really, if you can, do advise everybody to reflect on what's happened for you since 2008 while it's been in Capricorn, and see if you can identify what your themes in Capricorn have been, and make a note of them. And then also look at, since March 2023, when it was moving into Aquarius, we've had some introductions to what our themes might be while Pluto's been there. So where's Pluto? There he is at 0000. Really nice. And we got a lot of Mercury there as well. It's in Mercury's bound, Venus is decan, Mercury's triplicity. So Mercury's got something to say there in a nice whole sign sextile from Sagittarius. So bringing in that Jupiter opposition. And our colleague Janessa, another good friend of ours, has written an article for the Astrologers Co-op on Pluto in Capricorn. So I do direct you to that. It's very good if you want to know more about Pluto in Capricorn and get that bird's eye view of some things to think about. So check out the Astrologers Co-op. You can find them on Substack or on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll find your article there if you search for Pluto. And no doubt, I would imagine the Astrologers Co-op will be writing about Pluto in Aquarius as well. And I know Adam Ellenbus, our teacher, is doing a whole workshop, webinar on Pluto in Aquarius, and he's talking about AI and aliens. And there was one other thing as well skipped my mind.
I heard the name and I loved it, and now it's escaping me.
Yeah, there was 3 things, wasn't there, coming up? I'll try and put a link into the notes. But yeah, if you want to know more, then yeah, you're into astrology, then it's worth attending that webinar that he's doing as well. So the aspects that we've got on the 18th, the day before, we had the exact opposition of Mercury and Jupiter. And on the 18th, we also had the Sun trining Neptune just before Neptune turns direct in December. And on the 19th today, we've got Pluto entering Aquarius.
I found his talk.
Oh, you have? Oh, great. What?
Yeah. Yeah. It's set up for November 21st, p.m. Eastern time. And it's called Pluto in Aquarius, AI, Aliens, and New World Orders.
New World Orders. Yeah.
I'm excited about that one.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to remember this is Pluto moving so slowly. It's a 20-year shift. It's not like going to be an overnight thing.
No.
But when you look back on the 15 years, like since 2008 in Capricorn, you can see those shifts that have happened. And yeah, I mean, somebody said to me as well, as much as we can imagine things, who would have thought of AI in 2008? Because it was beyond our conception. I think it will be the same with Pluto in Aquarius, that there will be things as Pluto reaches the end that we cannot even imagine now, that are just beyond our frames of reference, particularly in Aquarius, because it is that sign of ideas and thoughts and conceptions as well. That's quite exciting, but also a little bit scary, because yeah, the concept of AI would just have been unimaginable in 2008. So yeah, that was where my mind was blown. It was like, yeah, that's so right. In these 20 years, we can say what we think it's going to be about now, but I suspect that so much of it will be about things that we just can't even imagine now. Maybe
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And even still, you know, as much anxiety as that can hold, as much as things change, there are still always the things that are everlasting and evergreen, you know, and as much as things change, things will always be the same, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I had my word for Pluto. We were talking about this before we started, about the transformation word getting overused. And I used the word empowerment, that I believe Pluto brings empowerment. He's about power, but that can come through disempowering you initially, taking your power away in areas where you're meant to grow in order to empower you. And I experienced that. And I think my first taste of Pluto moving into Aquarius was all about me showing up on camera as an astrologer. It seemed to be that was my first steps into, like, Pluto in Capricorn was about me becoming an astrologer, my studies and everything. But I did notice as it moved into Aquarius that I was meeting that challenge. And I think it was like, are you going to do this or not? Are you going to let your fear of doing it stop you? And about how am I going to show up? What kind of astrology do I want to talk about? How do I want to do this? And it was like, okay, am I going to let those obstacles overcome me? And I think sometimes if we let those obstacles stop us, the push to that empowerment then can become overwhelming. I was reflecting on this earlier about that overwhelm, that sometimes when you're shown that shadow, and it can get overwhelming, I think sometimes that's because we've avoided, when we're shown, like the first few times that we're shown something, if we do try and avoid it, it then gets greater and greater, and that's when it can become overwhelming. So then it just gets a little bit scarier and much more harder to do. Whereas if we take it, okay, baby steps, one step at a time, do the thing, you know, and for me, it's been very much about recording rather than going live and things like that, that, you know, do it at a time, collaborating rather than doing it on my own, you know, finding what do I need to make this possible and manageable. And that's how I think it's shown up for me. I don't know if you've been able to identify anything, Shawna.
Actually, mine goes hand in hand with you right there. Although this feels very much tied into the Saturn station right now, getting myself comfortable. I'm very much a 12th house person. I don't like to show my face. I'm awkward and uncomfortable. Pre-recording helps for sure. Lives, I just kind of turn into a statue, and it, you know, I get nervous about what to say and how to say it. And, you know, kiddo actually recently said to me, you've got to learn how to take your mask off so people can actually see you. And I'm like, well, that's awfully wise for 14. You know, when it ties back into the possibility of Saturn stationing and the mental health aspect, a lot of doing what we're doing, this is a push for us. This is this little thing is being brave for someone who's a 12th house person. So I'm an overthinker. I've got 5 out of 7 traditional planets in air signs making a trine, and 2 of those planets are in the 12th house, and they're pretty big ones. So it's, or small as it were. I am good at staying in the back, not necessarily speaking up when I could possibly, or feeling like I can't speak up. And so I feel like maybe there's definitely a bigger shift happening. It makes a big difference when you feel like you can control, you take the reins. So I guess I don't know if you're experiencing it this way, but by you taking the initiative and starting, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, that puts you in control. And that gives you a little more security. It gives you a better foundation to stand on.
I've just moved slowly through my comfort zone, I suppose. And I'm just so grateful for you and the ladies from Ask that we've been able to do this together.
Mm-hmm.
Like to build our confidence and work together in this way. That's really helped me. And I don't think I could have done that as a solo astrologer at all.
And I love the astro conversations too. So yeah, there's not anyone in my day-to-day life, like IRL, that actually has these conversations. So I cling to you and our other group members, the rest of our coven, to feed this astro habit.
Yeah, that's what's so great, that this is just an extension of like how we talk anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we'll just share it with more people, but really we're
hoping somebody.
Yeah, we're looking at this stuff anyway together and figuring out what it means for each of us together. It works. But yeah, I mean, for all of us to figure out what Pluto might mean in Aquarius and what it did mean in Capricorn really helps. And I suppose we should do that thing where we say, like, who it's going to affect is like definitely the fixed signs, likely to feel this shift. But you've had the introduction the first times it's gone in there. So this isn't totally unfamiliar energy until Pluto gets to the new degrees. So he's been at 0, 1, 2, but it hasn't gone into 3 yet. So that'll be totally new once he reaches there. But for now, we're going back to degrees he's been to before. But the fixed signs being Aquarius and the opposition of Leo, and then Taurus, where the full moon was, and the opposition of Scorpio, where we had the new moon this month. So there's been that shake-up in those areas. And I know with placements in Leo that I certainly felt it this summer that the Leo summer wasn't the same. That month wasn't the same as it usually would be because Pluto was in Aquarius at the time. And it was like, so the sun was opposed by Pluto, which was a totally new experience that I hadn't had while it's been in Capricorn or in any of these signs before. And obviously it hasn't been in Aquarius in my lifetime before. So that was a new experience that we're just going to have to get used to for the next 20 years. But sometimes it's more intense at the ingress and then it settles down, she says, trying to reassure herself. Hopefully that little boost of energy and momentum to my work and everything that I used to get in the summer hasn't completely gone, because I used to look forward to Leo season. It's when I would put things out and do things. But yeah, and a lot of synchronicities would happen and they just didn't. But it's like interesting to see that, okay, that's the astrology. It's like you've got to roll with it, haven't you, and go with that flow. That's what's happening. And yeah, it was new energy that we were feeling into. I have these questions that I've shared before with Pluto, but I do share them where there's an important sort of movement, the wisdom of transformation. And the question that Pluto's asking is, where does your own bid for your personal power? So this isn't about power over others. This is about just feeling empowered within yourself. And where does that bid for yourself, for shining your brightest light, scare you? And if you can identify that, and that's how it helped me identify that it was about this, showing up on camera and talking about astrology in this way, that helped me identify where does it scare me? And then am I prepared to meet that challenge? And for my own personal empowerment to meet it and answer Pluto's call. So if you can identify where that scares you, where you're feeling disempowered maybe, or where Pluto's movement starts to disempower you, that gives you a key or an insight into where you want to look. Start looking to empower yourself. And meet Pluto halfway with this process. is a great way to work with it. So events are not just happening to you, they're happening for you and supporting you in that process of getting empowered. And in terms of the aspects that we're finding, we're seeing the outers connecting in that sextile between Neptune in Pisces, trining Uranus in Taurus.
Oh, well, Uranus and Taurus in sextile, definitely. But now we've got an aversion between Pluto and Neptune for a while.
Yeah. And a reminder of some dates. The 2nd of September was when Pluto returned for its last visit to Capricorn. And we've used some different analogies of what this might be, like a cha-cha dance. And Shawna talked about jumping rope, the different types of things with that movement of energy. My first teacher talked about it as like coats of paint that you need, like your base coat, your first coat, your second coat, and the last visit to Capricorn being the third coat of paint, just finishing up everything. And we said last week about Venus in Capricorn there is nice now, leaving those last touches to that decorated room, just leaving the flowers there and removing all the duct tape and everything, and just when you've decorated a room and you put all the curtains back up and everything, it's all pretty and nice. And certainly in Capricorn, it can be about failing institutions, because Capricorn's very much about the structures of time. And I did see that, you know, as Pluto is moving back into Capricorn. I saw in the news in the UK things like the BBC would come into the news, or the courts, or anything like very old structures that have been with us for a very long time. Some of the government inquiries, there would always be more news, more developments with them. As Pluto moved back into Capricorn again, things would develop on all those stories. So I wonder if there will be a last tying up of those stories before Pluto moves out. The Pluto turned direct, head towards Aquarius on the 11th of October. He'll be there till 2044, I believe. His first ingress to Aquarius was the 23rd of March, 2023. So if you saw some insights as to what your Pluto and Aquarius story might be, these are the dates to watch out for. The second ingress was on the 21st of January, 2024. Now is the third ingress on the 19th of November. His next retrograde will come at 3 degrees of Aquarius, and he'll retrograde back to 1 degree of Aquarius. And that will be on the 4th of May to the 11th of October, 2025.
So, shows you too just how slowly Pluto moves. Yeah. You know, we'll only get a couple of degrees in to Aquarius before that retrograde happens again.
That retrograde back? Yeah. So we literally have the 2 degrees that we've already experienced, 1 new degree, and then he retrogrades back over everything we've already made progress through. And I've already spoken about how he's making new aspects for us to adjust to, which really affects the fixed signs, but also these cardinal signs that have had Pluto in their sign for the last 15 plus years. So that's Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra will feel the relief, I imagine, of that story being closed for them. However, Pluto has empowered you during that move, whether it was in your sign of Capricorn or opposing your sign of Cancer or squaring your signs of Aries and Libra. That story has now come to a final close. You know, Venus is leaving the flowers for you, but that story is complete. So hopefully you can find a way that you've been empowered during that time.
Just with those cardinal signs, that means you're finally going to get the relief from the squares, right? Or the opposition, depending on your placement. You'll have a little bit of reprieve. Maybe you'll see those changes that have been taking place over the last 15 years. 18 years, something like that, finally making that final change into the new, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you can look back and feel proud of yourself in terms of how you've grown in that time. Okay, so that's all we've got for you this week. Have a good week, and we'll be back for you next week looking at the 20th to the 27th. I'm Sonia from Celestial Astrology. And Shawna, would you like to just remind people how to find you?
Yeah, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, it's all Smart Astro. Threads too, and smartastro.com if you want to schedule a reading.
Brilliant, thank you. And if you've enjoyed this or found it useful in any way, please remember to like and subscribe. It really does help us as a small channel to grow, and really does make a difference. So we really appreciate you when you do that, or when you comment and let us know how it's affected you, or of course drop any questions for us. Thank you. Bye-bye.